Good morning. Welcome to worship here at High Country UCC. Whether you're joining us in person in our space or whether you're joining us online, we are so glad that you showed up here today. Whether it's your first time here or your 1,000th time here, you make this community better just by your presence being here. You are welcome here not in spite of who you are or what you have done in your past or what you did today, but exactly for who you are at this moment in time as a person who seeks community in this place. We seek to provide that community here and online to connect to those wider folks that are part of our church. So we're so glad that you're here today. This Lenten season has been a journey for us through hard emotions. We've been talking about pain and trauma and things that are really hard to often talk about. And today, it's another topic of grief that we often hold very deep within us and don't always know how to get it out or to work through it or move through it. I find it especially lovely that we have sunshine and warmth on a day like today, because for me, that hard work that we do together is easier when we can feel some lightness too. There's a lot of contrast in our lives when we deal with dark emotions or hard things, that there's a lightness that we can feel alongside that and work through those things. So I hope you feel held in community today and supported in wherever you are on that path of grief or sorrow or happiness, joy, any of those things that you come in here with. If you need a break today and you need to step away, we totally understand that. Grief sometimes is hard to talk about, especially in a community of people. But know that we seek to provide a very safe and brave space in here, and you are welcome in whatever capacity you can participate in today. We're so glad that you're here. Let us worship together.
Systems dealing in death swirl all around us. Fear and anger surge through our bodies. Uncertainty is our unwelcome companion. We cry out to you, O God of life. Protect trans youth, people who are able to get pregnant. Protect victims of war. Protect water, air, and soil. Surprise us with your creative waymaking. Compassionate Spirit, our hearts break for all that we have lost. We are disoriented by grief, personal and global. The love we carry for our departed loved ones feels like it has nowhere to land. We refuse to harden our hearts by swallowing our cries over those losses, and we refuse to ignore our despair when we come in contact with mental illness. God with us, guide us in the ways of soulful mourning. Move with us through the flow of grief. Ground us in the shared experience of sorrow. Console us with hope for connection and gratitude, even amidst loss. Amen.
How many of you have actively chosen to be on this path? There we go. I don't know what path, whatever path you think this path is. Into the dark wood. A path sometimes that we may not know we're on it. Maybe we stumble and we find ourselves on it. And I don't know about you, but I give thanks that there are those of you that have chosen to enter it and to stay on it. For me, when we do this work together in community and we name it, we choose to be here together, there is grace here. There is hope here. We used this same song 6 years ago in another worship series called Gifts of the Dark Wood that was based on a text by Eric Elnes, who is a UCC minister. And in that book, he names 6 specific gifts: uncertainty, emptiness, being thunderstruck, getting lost, temptations, and then naming that many of us are called to be a misfit. As we sang back then, so we still sing these words today, that there are times and seasons in our lives when we are sent into these dark woods. And as we sang, I truly believe that the Spirit goes before us, so that when we hear that still small voice saying, "Go, be my presence in the world," that there is something there that undergirds us to be this presence of hope, to be this presence of love, to be this presence of grace. And I don't know about you, as you were so confused, maybe that's just how the state I live in, but we have to acknowledge, I think, that these journeys are not always clearly defined, set out, nice, narrow, easy to see boundaries. We find ourselves on these paths of darkness, and sometimes the shadows, they push us into places where we have to discern things. And in the discernment, we try to feel our way and to look around us to see what we can see even in the midst of the darkness. And we encounter unexpected challenges. We encounter things that we had either ignored for too long, or that maybe we didn't even know they were there until we truly began to put our eyes in that darkness and to understand what it means to be there in that moment. And I also want to acknowledge that these are choices that we make. I come from a world where challenged by choice is how we run our lives. And each moment is that choice of mild, medium, or spicy hot. And what choice am I going to make right now in this moment? Is it going to be a choice of rest and comfort and Sabbath? Is it going to be a choice to climb 6 feet up in the air? Is it going to be a choice to do a 10-mile hike? And so these choices can be daunting. And when we do them in community, it begins to even feel sometimes more healing, more comforting, and other times like, I don't know if I want to be with these misfits. In these last years, we have gone through a process to become wise, a wise church, welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and engaging of anyone on the mental health spectrum. And this process has not always been smooth and easy and clearly defined. In our opening up and in our acknowledging where we have been in this path, we have found some unexpected challenges, right? We've learned that in our faith communities for too long, we haven't wanted to talk about our mental health. We haven't wanted to acknowledge that there is mental illness that is a real and true thing. And so I want to acknowledge today that as we understand that the church has been a significant player that has actually created and promoted stigma of mental illness, mental disease, this is grief. And our grief realizes that we have both inherited some of these harms, and our grief also opens us up to our responsibility for how we move forward and our choices for healing. Our grief lens opens us up into the practices of hope for all to know wellness, regardless. And so I want to strongly invite you, invite me, invite each one of us to continue on this path. Whether you're running into the dark walls or you're tripping over a rock you didn't know you were there, may we stay on this path of healing through these dark emotions, and may we learn the wisdom of grief, moving through our grief as it swirls and spirals up and down. And I've heard these tales of waves of grief when we least expected just flow over us. And I believe that it's in this path where grace is received on this journey. And somewhere, somehow, there is a gratitude that begins to emerge. We recognize somehow that there is a part of the healing process that is about the confession, that is about the naming of where we have gone wrong, where our culture has gone wrong, and naming what we might do next. And so today I am inviting us to grieve that our spiritual lives have really only been recently connected into our mental and our spiritual lives have only been recently connected. And still today, we have churches in our midst that don't want to talk about the mental realm in connection and conjunction with our spiritual realm. And this does harm. For too long, our culture has denied the validity of mental illness. We don't understand that human wholeness comes when we are able to speak about it and to speak about all the parts of our belovedness. For too long, we have said that's a lack of faith. For too long, we've denied that there is even something known as mental disease. We've heard tell that entering therapy was not the way. Instead, just go talk to your pastor. Just pray a little harder. Or I'm here to tell you, I'm not a mental health professional. I can point you to that path. And so in this work, I'm encouraging us to name the stigma around illness and disease, specifically in regards to our brain function. And I encourage you to enter therapy if that is where you are being called to enter. And so it is with this story, this background, this knowledge that our hearts can be opened. And it is with this that we come to our time of confession and assurance of pardon this week with truth-telling in mind. in our liturgy, we are encouraged to affirm the practice of both and. We confess a part of our journey where we as individuals or as a culture have misstepped, and we affirm the desire to transform our grief, to transform our fear, to name our despair, and to push it into ways where we know wisdom. Into energy, we find action, even when it is really uncomfortable. It is through this naming and affirmation that we begin the alchemical process of healing, which is a transformation towards healing and wholeness. So you'll find in your worship guide a call and response. As you are called and able, I invite you to join us. And this is your worship guide. I encourage you to take this with you this week and to maybe edit it. Like, what would I have said? If I was the one writing this, what would I have said? And what words do we need to continue and to say over and over? At times, we can feel as though we exist under an oppressive cloud of silence, a blank static that fills the channel and blocks us from tuning into the song of our lives. We fail to acknowledge our part in creating a world where we deny ourselves and our holistic health. We confess that historically our culture has stigmatized mental illness and disease, depression, anxiety, addiction, post-traumatic syndrome, post-traumatic stress disorder, bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, autism, eating disorders. We hid, we denied the truth, we ignored the stories. We confess that we too have been part of the systems that denied the humanity and belovedness of each diagnosed or diagnosable divine creation. We commit to end the silence that allows the powerful to deny dignity, care, and support. May we listen carefully, acknowledging the grief, the loss of relationships because of dementia, addictions, depression. We grieve our ignorance and failures to recognize the illness and offer love. The rising numbers of death by suicide cause us to despair. We want our hearts to tell the truth. We acknowledge that our blindness to name the mental disease was behavior led by fear and despair. We commit to learning and telling the stories of bravery and courage by beloveds working the 12 steps, going to therapy and taking meds, accepting diagnosis. And so into this moment, into this community and connection of hearts and souls, we call on the peace of Christ demonstrated to dwell among us. We celebrate our kin among us who live with a known mental illness and those who suffer without knowing why. We will intentionally and persistently support their health with empathy and respect. In celebration, we affirm the gift of more truth and light, uplifting our ordinary sacredness for flourishing. May the peace of Christ be with each one of you. I'm going to invite you to stand up and to move around and to offer someone a sign of peace or a bow, or to invite someone into a hug, making sure that you receive consent before you just go barrel hugging someone. And remembering that our immune systems aren't what they were. So let us share among us the peace of Christ.
home.
I'd like to invite you to take a minute, put both feet flat on the floor. Close your eyes if you're so inclined, and take a few deep breaths. Just really bring your attention to this moment, to your physical aspect of yourself. And notice any aches or pains maybe that are there physically. Notice any tension you're holding. And see if you can just let those go as much as possible. Excuse me. We acknowledge that there are times in our lives when we feel separate from everything and everyone, either by choice or not. So I'd like you to bring your hands up in front of you and imagine that you're pushing things away, pushing people away. Feel what that separation feels like in your body. What does it feel like to create a separation? But I want to acknowledge, and I'd like for you to do the same, as we bring our hands together, that we are in reality connected to everything. We're literally breathing the air that has been in someone else's lungs right now. We're feeling the gravity pull us to earth. The water that flows in our bodies come from the rain and from the oceans and might possibly have been in another body. And we are connected to source, to spirit, in whatever way that manifests for you. So feel that change in your own body. What does it feel like to feel as if you're connected? Now I'm going to ask you to drop your hands toward the floor, toward the ground, acknowledging that we all have grief, we all have pain, we all have fear. In your imagination, imagine that energy of fear and grief draining through your feet into our Mother Earth. Feel the support that Spirit gives to us, that the earth gives to us, and ground our sorrows, ground our fears. And just sit with that for a moment and really feel that draining away. I'm going to invite you to raise your arms, and we're opening to compassion, both for ourselves and for others. Allow your heart to open, your spirit to open, and feel compassion, both for yourself and for others. And feel what compassion feels like in your body, physically. And relax. Bring your attention back to your breath for just a moment. Feel your feet on the floor. And just be in this moment. Thank you.
There you go. Thanks, I feel so centered. Tamara was talking about, did we choose our paths? And I was thinking about that. Did I choose to be a ICU chaplain at a huge hospital? I don't know. I needed to move out of Winston-Salem, and I had some cousins in Cleveland, and I thought that might be a good place to go. And sitting with hundreds of people as they die or as they're with their families, their loved one as they died, has changed me fundamentally. I certainly didn't choose. I chose to be a spiritual director. Now, I chose to do that. So that's the lens I'm coming through, as chaplain and spiritual director. I didn't choose to have late-term pregnancy loss. I didn't choose to be a grief. I did choose to be a grief group facilitator. Maybe poetry chose me as a way of care. I'm not sure. But here I am, someone who has sort of learned how to be with people in grief. Someone who sort of loves the work of healing around grief, someone who has been supported by poetry, by other people, by teachers. So that's how I come to you today. So there's a sheet that you may have. Are my earrings making sound on this? Yeah? Let's take them out. Y'all can look at how cute they are before I take them out. Thank you. So in the handout, I printed some of my favorite things about grief, and the theme today is grief as praise, as a form of praise. So I'll read a few of these quotes. One from Martin Pritchell. He says, grief is praise of those we have lost. Our own souls who we have loved, I think I typed that sentence wrong. If we do not grieve what we miss, we are not praising what we love. We are not praising the life we have been given in order to love. The Polish poet Adam Zagajewski has a beautiful poem called "You Must Praise the Mutilated World." And then Mary Oliver says, in part of her poem from her poem Landscape, she says, "Every morning I walk like this around the pond, thinking, if the doors of my heart ever close, I'm as good as dead. And every morning so far, I'm alive." So today I'll just be thinking through with y'all, what does it mean to praise what we have lost? How do we keep the doors of our heart from closing amidst pain? What does it feel like to praise the mutilated world, as the Polish poet would say? I don't know what happens when you hear praise, grief as a form of praise. That was very confounding to me when I first heard it. But I think one of the examples that resonates me the most is, especially when we think about eco-grief or our sorrow around climate collapse or the violence that corporations do to our world, and all of us are saying, please no, we love this place, right? I think about people who have gardens. I think about people who walk in the woods and know the names of the woodpeckers. I think about people doing habitat restoration around them gently, right? What is this but not praising? The mutilated world. So that to me shows how even in our grief we can experience praise. You know, maybe we see less woodpeckers this year. Well, how much do we love the one that we see, right? Another example is, I know a woman whose child died in the opioid crisis. And my goodness, is she an advocate for harm reduction in her community? My goodness, does she cook community meals and sit with people who are dependent on drugs as if they were her own child? You know, is that not praising who she has lost? Is that not continuing her care for her child, right? So we know, we've seen this happen. And I think we do this intuitively too. Part of my spiritual director lens is, I imagine you're already doing a lot of these things, and sort of giving yourself credit and honoring the ways you're attending to yourself and others in grief. Because you have stories for me, I know. I'm just telling you some that I know. I have a friend whose longtime partner left kind of right before their wedding. And he took himself to Europe, and he ate gelato, and he cried on train rides, and he Skyped his therapist, and he took himself to Broadway shows that he wanted to go to, right? He's celebrating life and crying on trains. Do you know, like, we see this in other people. I think of someone I went to school with who, at his wedding, his mom had died the year before, and played her favorite song, which was Motown. And he had everybody, the opening song was Everybody's Dancing to Motown, right? He was praising his mom, the love that's still there. So I was thinking about sort of what are some ways to think about some actions or some frameworks for praising what has been lost. And I was thinking of, this and this and this. These are things I've talked about in grief groups that have worked for me. And I noticed that they were all sort of tenets of chaplaincy, of spiritual care. And I wrote them there. I wrote them down on the sheet for you. But I'm going to go through them. In chaplaincy, we define spiritual care as the things that we're looking for, or as healing. This is what humans have core needs for: healing, meaning, purpose, and belonging. So we sort of consider these things as we consider what it's like to praise loss. The first one that I'm talking about we just did, which is embodiment. Embodiment invites healing within ourselves because, we know this intuitively, and science backs it up, It's like and when I was in the wake of grief, I would call my friend and I would say, I'm going on a stupid walk for my stupid mental health, right? And then I would go on a walk and I would say, oh my gosh, I feel so much better. And we know this. Science backs it up. But science backs it up. We actually have bilateral, Mary, correct me if I'm wrong, we have bilateral brain stimulation when we're looking back and forth. And so when we're walking through the woods, this movement of our bodies and of our eyes helps us integrate trauma. It's like really cool. Also, the experience of biodiversity, which we're very lucky to experience a lot of it, gives us our own permission to be in our own biodiversity. Different beings are on different times of their lifespan. They look different. They are in different places. So it is with us. Today I am the mushroom. Yes, you know? So embodiment. Some things that have been really helpful to me, so walking or being outside, rocking in a rocking chair, if walking is harder for you, that is some good movement in your body. Some things that have been helpful to me have been dance, putting a song on, moving your body. And then we do have therapeutic dance circles here that I go to, where you just move your body for an hour. Gentle yoga, hugging people, different types of meditation, whatever you feel drawn to and whatever feels kind. You will not find me in a hot yoga class. You will not find me trail running. I do not feel drawn to it. It does not feel kind. So trusting your body's wisdom, embodiment, praising the body that you have, allowing grief and trauma to move through the body. I often remind myself when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, that the really uncomfortable emotions that come up last in our bodies very briefly. I mean, minutes or less. And so all day long, I can be running around, avoiding being in my body, just distracting myself, one thing to the next. I'm going to just not land in my body, not breathe. And I'm usually avoiding an emotion that takes 45 seconds to feel. Maybe I need to cry for a couple minutes. So knowing that the emotions that come up when we experience embodiment only last for a little bit is really helpful to me. It will pass naturally. You're not going to let me talk for too long, are you? Okay, I didn't look at my watch before. I could talk about grief forever. I won't. Another one is, another of our spiritual needs is meaning making. And a great way to do this is through ritual, and we do this already. And singing together is embodiment and is ritual. Some examples of this that I can think of is my friend Keith was a pediatric chaplain, and he was leading a ritual to care for the staff, and it involved seashells. And he took a seashell and he wrote the name of the child who had died and placed it in a jar on his desk. And then he did that for every child. And for him, it was putting his love, making a place for his love to land, for him to hold, for him to remember. We do these things intuitively. My friend who had a stillborn baby, someone sent her wind chimes that she hangs up and listens to. And when I lost my twins, she sent me wind chimes. And it's very windy here. So I couldn't have them up all the time. But when Dan and my partner and I, when the day is beautiful and we're outside or we're on the porch, we'll go get the wind chimes and put them up, right? This is a ritual. We're doing ritual. We know how to do this intuitively. We're making meaning. We're not saying that this loss needed to happen. We're saying we're integrating it into our life, and this is where the love can land in my life today. Ritual, yeah. Love rituals. Another one is, we got healing through embodiment. We got meaning making through ritual. And then caregiving is another type of a way to praise what we have lost. I gave the example of the woman whose child died from the opioid epidemic. There's all this data about if older folks are living in isolation, if they have a plant or a pet or a garden or a project, right? Our quality of life. We as humans want to have a purpose. We want to have a purpose. We want to have a reason to get up in the morning. And I'm not saying when you're in the throes of grief, and again, this is listening to yourself, to force yourself to be out in public and to do stuff no, that's not what we're saying. It's saying be curious about when you're ready to get outside of yourself because it connects us with the cosmos, right? Barry was talking about how we're all connected. It helps us see that it is just not me and my grief and my isolation. I am part of the community. Everyone was being very kind to me in the wake of my loss, but I remember that some people were getting together for dinner and they were talking about who was going to bring what. I was like, please let me bring a pie. Please, I need to be of use. You know, I was grateful for being taken care of, but I was ready. I painted a wall. I helped my friend paint a wall. I was like, oh my gosh, doing a project, you know, getting outside of myself. And then even a few months later, a friend was having a really hard time. And I was like, girl, if you can get to the mountains, I would love to make up my guest bed for you. I would love to serve you cups of tea, right? But thinking about this as the integration of our own grief, caregiving, because we're part of the interdependence, right? We are cared for, we care for others. So we got ritual, meaning making, caregiving, purpose. And then the last one, we're doing it, y'all, give yourself credit, is community. We want healing, we want meaning, we want purpose, we want belonging. And community helps us with this human need of belonging. I moved from attending grief groups to leading grief groups, right? And I checked in with a lot of spiritual counselors before I made that transition, right? But being a part of a community of people who've experienced a specific loss, they're grief support groups for all different types of loss. And being among people who speak that language, you know, I have a friend who's a young adult and his dad died. And I was like, baby, you got to go to a grief support group. Like, I need you to go to one for young adults. And he said, you know, he did not know what he would do this year if he didn't have it because he didn't have to explain anything to folks in that group. And I'm like, if there's one thing I've done, it's get my friend to a grief support group where you don't feel a sense of isolation. You don't feel like I'm way out in left field. You know, he talked about how he was getting ready, my friend, he was getting ready to go home for the first time after his dad died. And he was like, grief group, what do you got for me? Like, and then, you know, how was it for you? And then he came back and they were all like, how was it? You know, so community, connection. I grew up in a church that was more conservative than I would for my taste, but there was a church, an open and affirming Methodist church down the street from me that became my home church in Winston-Salem, Green Street in Winston-Salem. I was a chaplain, I was an intern there when I went to divinity school. But the first time I went there, I went right after I broke up with my long-term boyfriend. And I was just crying all the time. I mean, I was like in my early 20s, just crying, you know. And this church offered me a sense of belonging because I was neither ignored nor ostracized with my open crying. You know? Side hugs, pats. No one asked me to explain a dang thing. Tissues. No one looking at me like, I mean, and this church, again, folks with mental illness, folks who are actively using, they're all welcome here, right? So this sense of belonging, that you're welcome here in your mess, right? So my curiosity is, how do we create those spaces within our own community? And how do we find them for ourselves? And the thing that we know is, the thing that we know is we have to attend to our own grief. The way we create these spaces is by attending to our own grief. So you're invited in the weeks ahead today to consider, I wrote some questions about, but like what losses within you are asking to be honored? How are you already doing that? Are there any other ways you might add? What keeps the doors of your heart open? Thanks for letting me be with y'all. Yeah.
I'm so grateful for this place to come together to practice and support one another with these core needs that Molly offered to us in this one service as we come together, the opportunities for embodiment and healing, and now we'll really practice some more ritual as we've been doing through the service as well, and Molly's caregiving for us and Barry's caregiving for us, and hopefully each of us one for another and our community. This is one of my favorite rituals, and the visual impact of our community when we light our candles here together, again borrowing from our Unitarian Universalist siblings. And I love the phrase that Molly offered of a place for our love to land. This place is a place for our love to land, and this is a place for our love to land. As we join in prayer today, please remember that this is a live streamed service and is being recorded for viewing later. Also, if you are watching the live stream, I do have my phone always with me monitoring the comments. So if you have a comment that you would like to have a candle lit and your words shared, if you will put that in the comments when I come back up to close, I will include that. For all in this space or joining us digitally, please remember to share your words within your own level of comfort and your courage that is best for you today, and with the consent of anyone for whom you share a joy or a concern. You are also welcome to come and light a candle silently, knowing that your words will be heard. We hold space together and feel together, trusting that your need or celebration will be shared. The microphone will be placed here with Molly's earrings for your use if you want to speak, and just place it back there between people who come up, and you can come up here when you're ready to share. And offer a moment of quiet between each person. We share within our gathered body, practicing our mission statement and our relational covenant. This ritual supports offering comfort and help to one another, celebrating together, sharing with one another some of what is most important in our lives to build our community with more closeness, supporting courage and openness for the sacred acts of allowing ourselves to be seen and heard, and listening and healing together. The flames will offer visible evidence of our need, celebration, openness, vulnerability, and healing. May we observe our shared divinity through this light as our love lands here. I want to start with a candle today for grief that I carry and that my loved ones carry, both that is known and that is unknown, that is acknowledged and that is held wordlessly.
My candle is for joy for a trip that went safely and well, and for parents who are well and fit.
In honor of all cancer survivors who, after a long period of time, have had their cancer return. In honor of a friend, I offer this prayer.
having gone through 4 major deaths in my family in the last couple of years, my mother, my brother-in-law, my best friend, my husband, and then Dan and Don, it's just like all of a sudden I've realized how precious life is to me. And the fact that these people I still talk to every day and I love with all my heart have helped me to see that I can still continue life and can love people and be a part of them by being a part of others.
I'm lighting this candle for 9, 17, and 18-year-olds who are at my house in the basement on spring break. And several of them are going to ASU for a tour on Monday, but it's for the aspirations that they have for being an adult pretty soon.
And this prayer is for my brother Stephen, who's having a hip replacement tomorrow, and also for our country, that peace, empathy, and love overpower more negative forces.
This candle is for my daughter who has complex mental illness and has been re-hospitalized this last week, and for her brothers and her sister. It's a really hard time for them too.
We are lighting this candle in celebration of our family. Julie and I recently got engaged.
She didn't ask if she could say that out loud. I'm just kidding. I'm kidding. I'm lighting a candle for my dad, who has been in recovery for 15 years and loves AA and loves the fact that he can tell his story. And I love the fact that I am sitting in a community who can talk about things like this and be proud of knowing that people have struggles. And it just really fills my heart with a lot of love, and I was thinking a lot about him today.
I'm lighting a candle for a close friend of mine who's my daughter-in-law's grandmother, and her partner has returned cancer. She had breast cancer, and now she has abdominal cancer. And my partner fell out of bed. No, she did not. Her partner fell out of bed and broke 7 ribs. And so the caretaker, they're in Brazil, and I can't get to them. And so just send.
I will say, as one of the youngins here on some Sundays, I'm going to light this candle in honor of our LGBTQ community that has experienced church trauma in other places and have now found this space that we can exist and we can talk about hard topics and we can fellowship and have community.
I don't have a clue what God is trying to teach me. I buried my dad 8 weeks ago. My children said goodbye to their father yesterday. My son is having a very, very difficult time. I'm having a difficult time. My mother is thriving, thank God. But I don't know what to do with my grief. And so I just asked for prayer. Please.
It's in honor of Megan Ramsberg, who's a friend and a teacher. I never had gotten to grieve her, and my Aunt Selena, which I've never properly grieved for her either.
Creative, way-making God, thank you for hearing the words from our mouths and in our hearts today. Thank you for this community where we hold one another in love.
During this Lenten season, the story that has undergirded all of our worship has been that story in John's Gospel where we hear that Jesus began to weep. And then in the 11th chapter of John, we see Jesus witness Mary weeping, and he is moved to action by her tears also. Might we live in the legacy of Christ, who is moved with compassion for the grief-stricken and who works towards the ways of life. We gather our offerings today out of that gratitude in the spirit of compassion and solidarity. Amen. As we reach past the 12 o'clock hour, I offer some abridged announcements maybe for us today. We have a council meeting after worship today that you are welcome to stay around with, know what's going on in this community. That's very important to know. We have, you're going to say something.
Quickly.
So give it to you.
I got a letter yesterday from the family of Sterling and Barbara Whitener. And if any of you know them and remember them, Barbara is turning 100 in April. And they are requesting notes of encouragement and celebration, and Barbara reads them over and over. So I'm going to put this out there on the fellowship table on the thingy, bulletin board. And so please send a note.
Thank you. Spirituality and Nature Group, is that today that they gather? Yes. Gathering today at 3 o'clock. 4. I was about to say it's 4:30 in here. Okay, 4:30, Spirituality and Nature. If you haven't been a part of that group before, I know that they'd embrace you with open arms, and it is a beautiful day to be in nature and to experience spirituality outside in a community together. I want to say a quick thank you to Carol for writing these treasurer reports every week. I know you all may not notice them as much, but it is such a labor of love to go through our financial health and well-being and to keep up with that. Thank you, Carol. It's a hard job to do, and I feel lifted when I see where we are because it makes me feel like knowing what we're doing in this community. So I hope that you'll pay attention to those reports, and that helps you understand kind of where we are as a community and where you might fit in also. Let us offer this dedication of offering together for all these things. It's out of thanksgiving, gratitude, and joy we offer these gifts of ourselves, our engagement, our faith, and our material goods. May they be blessed and found faithful, co-creating a world of holy wholeness right before our eyes. Let us sing together.
You will hear my voice.
Beloveds, go forth, co-creating a world that is unafraid of heartfelt mourning, where we offer one another not only consolation in sorrow, but actions to alleviate grief. For God is with us in our sorrow. She does not leave us without consolation. She does not leave us without stubborn hope. Amen.
Amen.